The culmination of Destiny's Light and Darkness saga, The Final Shape, has now been out for 5 days. In this video, I will discuss my first impressions and general reaction to the expansion's story and gameplay. The witness analysis is coming, but I need a bit more time to digest the expansion before fully diving into the narrative weeds. This video will contain spoilers for the campaign and post-campaign content. As you can probably tell based on the title, I think The Final Shape is a masterpiece, and overall my favorite campaign from both a gameplay and story perspective, eclipsing my previous favorite, The Witch Queen. Going into the expansion, the stakes were incredibly high. With the poor reception to Lightfall, missed revenue projections, and layoffs at developer Bungie, the studio needed to win back players in order to survive. Many core members of the game's community stopped playing during Lightfall's seasonal content, particularly during the extended 6-month season of The Wish. I continued to play during that period because I was still having a lot of fun and found joy in making the game part of my routine. The vibes within the remaining community were not great. Many people were afraid that Bungie and Destiny were one step away from imploding under their own weight. The Into the Light event during April and May brought many lapsed players back into the fold and rejuvenated the community. After Lightfall, there was a lot of concern that Bungie wouldn't be able to stick the landing and end the Light and Darkness saga on a high note, but Into the Light brought hope for the future. The Final Shape released on June 4th, 2024 with an unconventional structure. Instead of the standard 8-mission legendary campaign like Witch Queen and Lightfall, Final Shape featured 7 missions followed by what would traditionally be considered post-campaign content, which takes place before the raid and 8th mission. People attuned to the marketing would have known this was happening from the moment the expansion was revealed, as developers had stated they wanted the raid to feature the Witness to allow the character to live up to the apocalyptic universe-ending stakes of the story. On June 7th, the Salvation's Edge raid was released, and after the world's first completion, a 12-player activity unlocked, where players finished off the Witness. I enjoyed the unconventional structure of the narrative because I felt it allowed the Ludo narrative of the gameplay to resonate in a way that would have not been possible with a traditional Destiny campaign structure. The deviation from the norm achieved the goal of making the Witness feel as important as the narrative suggested. The Witness had to be weakened in the 7th campaign mission and have their hold over the Traveler removed in the raid before they could be killed in the 8th mission. That extended fight made them feel like a compelling threat, more intense than any previous raid or campaign boss. It sidestepped the problem with previous campaigns, where major adversaries were defeated in missions that didn't feel as difficult as the lore would imply they should have been. Given raids are the pinnacle, most challenging piece of endgame content, it felt right that an antagonist of the Witness's caliber should be the final boss of the raid, while also allowing the narrative for players who didn't complete the raid to still feel satisfying and not like set up to an activity they wouldn't engage with. The legendary campaign itself also featured dungeon-like mechanics, making it feel more challenging than any previous campaign. I loved that each mission not only challenged me from a combat perspective, but also made me master new gameplay mechanics to proceed. I believe Destiny's PvE is at its best when players are challenged in combat, while simultaneously forced to juggle additional compelling gameplay mechanics, which the legendary campaign offered in spades. It's that unique formula which keeps me hooked on Destiny, so I'm glad it was used as an asset here. The story of The Final Shape picks up where Lightfall ended, as the Guardian has used Savathun's final wish granted by Riven to follow the Witness into the pale heart of the Traveler. The opening is the culmination of a year of attempts to follow the Witness after they used Ghost and the Veil to open the portal into the Traveler at the end of the Lightfall campaign. The only issue I have with this premise is wondering why it took the Witness so long to enact the final shape within the Traveler. It seems very convenient that they only neared the completion of their plans right at the moment the Vanguard was able to enter the portal. I don't fault Bungie's writers very much for this issue though, as it feels like more of a problem with the way expansions and their seasonal stories are constructed than an actual issue with the story itself. I'm hopeful that the switch to episodic content rather than seasons will remove some of the feelings of wheel spinning and filler created by stretching the entire supporting narratives for an expansion across dozens of tiny releases spanning the entire year, rather than a smaller number of more substantial offerings. As the Guardian enters the Pale Heart, things get weird. Inside the Traveler, the Guardian realizes the landscape is shaped by the memories and experiences of those who enter. They encounter areas that feel familiar, but which have been contorted and twisted by time and the brain. The remixing of familiar locations manages to avoid the feeling of a boring remake or remaster, and allows everything to feel unique while still reminding the player of the past. It's difficult to balance familiarity with the unexpected, but the Pale Heart perfects this idea. As you venture deeper into the heart of the Traveler, the landscape becomes increasingly corrupted by the Witness, moving from vibrant green vistas into the lifeless blight and destruction brought on by the Witness's use of the darkness and the horrors within their mind. The campaign is a linear journey from the light into the heart of darkness, evoking a kind of cosmic descent from untapped beauty into horrific and unnerving spaces, reminiscent of fantastical traveling epics like Lord of the Rings. If you look to the sky in front of you at any time, you can see the Witness's tower of darkness and corruption, while if you look behind you, you can see the beauty and sky of the Traveler's garden, interrupted by the beautiful lights of the iridescent portal. The entire landscape is very Asherian, sometimes feeling impossible, distorted, and maze-like, which makes for a compelling first experience. The Pale Heart incorporates unusual motifs of human and animal body parts, distorted and melded into the environment in creative and unexpected ways, which can be quite unsettling at points. I particularly like this moment in Iconoclasm, where the game forces you to squeeze into the mouth of a large distorted face to progress. The level design on display is incredible, and the visuals throughout are very high fidelity. As I played the campaign, I kept pausing to remark that the Pale Heart felt like the most beautiful and interesting destination Bungie has ever created. Once or twice every level, the Witness manipulates the landscape in an attempt to block the Guardian's progress. The player enters an opening marked with a veneer of broken glass, which constricts their movement into tight tunnels and dark corridors. Inside these spaces, the Witness corrupts the environment and pulls traumatizing memories from the pasts of each character, while trying to tempt them and the Guardian into abandoning the Traveler and joining the darkness. These areas are the most contorted and unnatural the Pale Heart gets, featuring frequent use of body parts as landscaping, forcing the player to reckon with how their bodies and past shape the world around them. Each level is inspired by the past of a particular character. Transmigration represents Cade's past, focusing on the Destiny 1 tower before it was destroyed in the Red War. It's overgrown with vegetation, representing the purest and least corrupted area of the Traveler. It casts the player's memory back to the times when the Destiny story was uncomplicated, dogmatic, and dichotomous, a time when light meant unequivocally good and dark meant unequivocally evil. The Guardian meets Cade and learns he's still alive, allowing the two characters to rejoice in a heartfelt reunion. It's a bit of a shame Cade being alive was spoiled in the earliest marketing for the expansion. It feels like this moment would have hit much harder had the reveal not been spoiled over a year before release, and not been emphasized in the finale of Season of the Wish, where Cade meets Crow. I understand why it was spoiled, because it's an idea too tempting not to share, but I personally believe believe showing restraint when marketing makes for a better experience when engaging with a piece of media for the first time. Sometimes the excitement or caution that drives people to consume marketing before purchase can diminish their experience, which is a shame. The title Transmigration refers to Cade's return from the underworld and afterlife to live again in a new, different body. In the text of the campaign itself, this character arc is executed perfectly. Temptation features the Guardian catching up with Crow and saving him from peril. The area remains very lifelike and full of vegetation, but we experience our first subtle elements of corruption by the Witness. This environment is inspired by the Dreaming City and Awoken architecture. It harkens back to Forsaken, which marked the first time the Destiny story began to move away from dogmatism and explore the temptations of darkness. Crow is the perfect character for this, as Forsaken saw him become corrupted by the darkness and forsake his allies, killing Cade and nearly destroying the Awoken. Crow has undergone the longest running and most extensive character arc of anyone in the Destiny franchise. After his execution as Aldrin, he was resurrected and slowly learned of and came to terms with his past, eventually becoming the Hunter Vanguard at the end of the final shape, something which has been foreshadowed for years at this point. His arc shows us that making mistakes doesn't condemn you forever. You can overcome a dark past and build a positive future. The Witness exploits Crow's past and corruption, trying to convince him to forsake the light like he did so many years ago. Crow refuses to give himself up to the Witness's temptations, ultimately being rescued by his ghost Glint and the Guardian. Exegesis is inspired by Ikora's past. An exegesis is an interpretation of a text, particularly a holy book. It's perfect for Ikora's character because she, more than anyone else in the franchise, has been interested in understanding the Traveler. The environment is heavily influenced by the landscape of Io, the last place the Traveler touched before the first collapse at the hands of the Witness, and the location Ikora sought refuge during the Red War. As the Warlock Vanguard, Ikora is concerned with the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. She seeks to interpret the Traveler and look to it for guidance, but as we've often seen, our god is silent, leaving its followers to make their own fates and meanings. The mission explores Ikora's search for purpose following her loss of light, the death of Cade, and Savathun's resurrection by the Traveler. The Witness tries to exploit the fact that the Traveler has never spoken to Ikora directly and given her meaning, but she holds strong until the Guardian arrives. Most of my videos are my own exegeses of the text and paratext of Destiny. As you can probably tell, I mostly play Warlock and feel connected to Ikora and her search for meaning. It's also interesting this mission is placed here chronologically, because Ikora's search for meaning is similar to the precursors in the Witness, who used the darkness to merge their entire species into a single being because they could not handle the Traveler's lack of answers. A core theme of the campaign is struggling to find meaning with your life and how that impacts your religiosity and faith. The Witness turns to darkness and seeks to contort the entire universe to its own constructed sense of meaning, while the Vanguard behaves reactively, simply trying to put out the fires created by the machinations of their greatest adversary. They find meaning in their community and history with each other, rather than the Traveler. Requiem follows Zavala and his trauma. Narratively, Requiem is one of the darkest pieces of content ever released in Destiny. It follows Zavala's loss of faith in the Traveler following the death of his wife and son at the hands of Elixni raiders during Earth's dark age following our collapse. He lost so much faith that he considered ending the life of his ghost and abandoning the light because it couldn't keep those he loved safe from harm. The environment is reminiscent of post-collapse Earth and reminds me of the European Dead Zone. The Witness exploits Zavala's deep-seated trauma and shakes his faith yet again. After landing in the farmhouse where his wife and son died, Zavala experiences a PTSD flashback and is only able to snap out of it after he reunites with his fire team. This mission hit me the hardest out of any in the campaign because I found Zavala's reactions very relatable. They might feel out of character for the steadfast and faithful commander of the Vanguard, but that's entirely the point. Trauma can make people hold inconsistent beliefs and bring someone back to a moment of crisis repeatedly, even after the danger and suffering has passed. The depiction of PTSD feels very realistic to me and hits particularly hard given that Zavala's original voice actor, Lance Reddick, a longtime Destiny player and fan of the franchise, passed away in early 2023. He was unable to voice the character for the final shape, so his role had to be filled by voice actor Keith David. David does an incredible job with his performance as Zavala. It feels very solemn and grave, which is exactly what the character needed. I argue Zavala's struggle with belief in the Traveler is the emotional core of the final shape. If Zavala completely lost his faith, he could turn to the darkness like the Witness, as seen in Elsie Bray's Dark Future. He approaches the brink of ennui and annihilation, but is saved by his friends. Ascent is the 5th mission in the campaign, which focuses on the Guardian's past. They climb an icy mountain pass and find themselves in the Cosmodrome of Old Russia, but a version that's twisted and corrupted. The mission ends at the place where the Guardian was born, where they find new power, acquiring each class's new super ability and using it to destroy a wave of enemies. This mission focuses on the final character in the fire team of 5 within the Traveler, the player character. The Guardian and Ghost confront their past and see that just beyond are the deepest areas of corruption and darkness. They stand on the precipice of darkness, as the Guardian has many times before, when they learn to fight the Witness and the Pyramid Fleet using the powers of darkness while avoiding complete corruption and annihilation. The Guardian has proven that they can use both the light and the darkness in unison, finding a middle ground between the dichotomous dogmas of the Vanguard's faith in light and the Witness's faith in dark. Fittingly, after this mission, we have our interlude, where the player is asked to complete 3 quests to try and speak to the Traveler. Each quest takes place within one of the 3 new lost sectors. A subplot plays out where the Guardian and Vanguard realize that Savathun and her Lucent brood have also entered the Traveler. A friendly Lightbearer wizard named Luzaku helps the Guardian on their journey to fight the Witness's forces and commune with the Traveler. I didn't expect a voiced Hive Lightbearer other than Savathun to make an appearance in this expansion, but was pleasantly surprised. The voice acting is amazing and makes the character feel very unique and mysterious. After clearing the 3rd lost sector, Cade sees a vision of his death. He connects with the Traveler, finally paying off a mystery that has been building throughout the campaign. He's been resurrected by Crow's wish to Riven that he could see Cade again and apologize, but this experience has been traumatizing. He was in some kind of afterlife where he became one with the Traveler and his ghost Sundance, so having the union broken has been distressing for him. During his conversation with the Traveler, his god takes Sundance's voice and asks Cade to sacrifice himself to save the universe. Cade's communion ends with a vision of Sundance's death. This experience profoundly disturbs Cade, as he doesn't want to die and is afraid to lose his friends a second time. I almost cried during this cutscene because Cade's reaction was heartbreaking. It was one thing to see images of Zavala's past trauma and grief, but to see Cade fully relive his partner's death was almost a step too far for me. This exploration of grief, death, and the afterlife is extremely well executed. I hope we see it explored further, because it's the first time we've gotten closer to learning how the Traveler works and what being a Lightbearer means. During the collapse, The Traveler split itself into smaller pieces, creating ghosts, and Cade's experience implies that every Lightbearer and ghost who die a final time find themselves within the Traveler again, reunified with their god. It's very reminiscent of Christian theology about the afterlife, which is kinda interesting. After the Lost Sector quests, the player completes the expansion's new strike, Liminality. The name represents the precipice the player stands on. They've reached the threshold of the campaign, where it stops focusing on the Vanguard and begins to move into questions about the Witness and the Traveler. The way forward contains the deepest and darkest corruption yet, but also more answers about the nature of the Traveler. The strike takes place within an ancient city, featuring pre-Pyramid Fleet architecture, likely created by the precursors to the Witness. The space is strewn with Ahamkara bones and occupied by the Dread. It feels like you're exploring a crypt or tomb, in the style of ancient Egyptian civilization. Throughout the level, walls of darkness close in on the player, forcing them to parkour their way through tight spaces to survive. Liminality was particularly exhilarating when I played it solo, so I'm looking forward to seeing what it's like as a Nightfall or Grandmaster Nightfall. At the end of Liminality, Zavala goes off on his own, leaving Targe behind. This serves as the lead-in to the 6th mission, Dissent. Zavala hears a voice from one of the veiled statues, who begs him to embrace darkness to learn how to defeat the Witness. He gives in and tells Targe not to follow him. This worries the Vanguard, so the Guardian, Ghost, and Targe follow Zavala's footsteps, interrogating every veiled statue they come into contact with. They gradually learn that the statues are inhabited by dissenters, who were made into one being during the Precursor's exuviation from an entire species into the Witness, but gradually came to doubt the final shape. For their dissent and abandonment of the plan, they're cast out of the Witness's mind and ossified into living statues, cursed to lead others to the final shape, rather than participate in carrying it out. The idea of a living being entombed within a concrete statue is horrifying to me. It's like being buried alive, unable to even die from that trauma. Zavala embraces the darkness and sees a vision of the ritual site where the exuviation was performed. The statues inside explain that what was made can be unmade. Before Zavala can learn more, the Witness arrives and threatens to kill him. At this point, Targe arrives and defies the Witness, who snuffs out Targe's light. Zavala escapes but is now lightless, forced to grieve his ghost much in the same way Osiris has. Zavala's loss of Targe shakes his faith again, but his allies console him enough to help him realize that they now have the beginnings of a plan to defeat the Witness. If Zavala can guide the Vanguard to the ritual site, they might be able to unmake the Witness. The landscape of the final 2 missions heavily features pyramid-inspired architecture, reminiscent of the pyramids in Shadowkeep, Beyond Light, Witch Queen, and Lightfall. The spaces between the pyramid architecture are brown and lifeless, a dust bowl ravaged by the corruption and blight of the Witness. The space truly embodies the narrative in a beautiful way. The Bungie art and level design teams are truly firing on all cylinders in the final shape. The final mission of the legendary campaign, Iconoclasm, is about the Witness itself. The Guardian approaches the Witness, who becomes desperate and pleads with them to embrace the final shape and abandon their crusade to protect the Traveler. This is ironic because the Witness themselves is an iconoclast on a crusade, trying to destroy its god, the same god of the Vanguard, the Traveler, defiling a holy place with its corruption, and trying to kill the being that gave their and many subsequent species life and prosperity. They want to overthrow their religion and ossify the universe into a shape of their choosing. The Witness offers the Guardian riches and godlike power beyond their imagination, a place in the final shape. This shows Ghost and the Guardian that their enemy is truly desperate and afraid of defeat, so they resolve to carry on to the site of the ritual, where they confront the witness for the first of 3 times, one for each side of the triangle. The ensuing boss fight uses several of the mechanics from different missions and is brutally difficult. On Legendary, the witness has an attack that can one-shot the player, meaning the entire fight puts you on the defensive, forcing you to avoid direct confrontation and kill other enemies you have power over. The player needs to survive 2 waves of attacks from the witness and their subjugators, using the Aegis shield relic from the Vault of Glass to protect and survive. At the end of each wave, the Traveler spawns a sword relic made of pure light to allow the Guardian to go on the offensive and attack the witness directly. They travel into a portal of the Traveler's reconstruction of the ritual site, where the Dissenters give the Guardian the key piece of information they need to weaken the witness. The statues that bear the Dissenters are still connected to the witness, meaning the player can hurt the witness by destroying a statue. The Dissenters sacrifice themselves to become martyrs, bringing the witness down with them. The statues begging for the player to destroy them feels chilling and quite dark, which I loved. I also loved the introduction of the sword relic, finally showing us that the Aegis has a complement, and in a moment of dire need, the Traveler can allow Guardians to go on the offensive and destroy a threat. After surviving 2 waves, the Traveler arrives as backup and the player gets the witness to retreat into their tower to try and execute the final shape before the coalition of Lightbearers and their allies can intervene. From this point forwards, the witness is on the defensive instead of the offensive, which shows that for the first time since the exuviation, someone has broken through their hubris and hurt them for the first time. In order to go on the offensive with the sword, the Guardian takes on substantial risk, causing them and their ghost to become gravely injured by the witness. The Traveler grants the player the Aegis and their light in order to shield themselves from the attack enough to escape and regroup. For the rest of the post-campaign content, Ghost is cracked and injured, showing that we're the closest to our final death and the loss of Ghost as we've ever been. The ritual boss fight is incredible and very intense. I enjoyed it immensely and found it very satisfying to complete. I loved that the witness is essentially invincible during the fight, showing the player that they're not powerful enough yet to destroy their strongest adversary. In Iconoclasm, I survived by running back and forth between cover, trying to stay as far away from the witness as possible, so I could defeat the subjugators and other enemies without being annihilated. After the mission, an amazing cutscene plays, where the witness shows their true colors. Enraged, they unfold themselves into a many-armed form, reminiscent of Vishnu. They're obscured by dust and smoke in this cutscene, not truly unveiled until the raid and 12-player activity. The Vanguard barely escapes the ritual site, as the witness attacks them with giant hands and their storm of darkness. Throughout all Final Shape content, the new enemy faction, the Dread, is interwoven with enemies from the other factions aligned with the Witness. This makes Final Shape's combat feel very unique compared to other expansions. Not only are there several enemy factions you face throughout each piece of content, you also contend with the Dread, a new faction warped by the Witness. Several of these enemy types have new attacks that can weaken or immobilize the player. The first member of the Dread, the Tormentor, arrived with Lightfall. The Final Shape introduces 6 new enemy types for the Dread. The Attendant and Weaver are scions who have been twisted and corrupted by the Witness to wield Stasis and Strand respectively. The Attendant uses Stasis Duskfield grenades to slow and trap the player in place so they can be killed by other enemies, while the Weaver uses Strand to throw the player around the arena where they can be killed by by physics, get thrown off the map, away from a critical objective, or into another dangerous enemy trying to kill them. The Grim and Husk don't really resemble any other enemies. The Grim are the first major flying enemies who can shoot the player and also give them tinnitus with their loud screams, making it difficult for the player to move and see temporarily. The Husk are aggressive enemies who spawn an exploding projectile upon death that will fly towards you and explode unless you damage their crit spot before killing them. The final new enemies are the scariest, the Subjugators. They're imprints of Rolk much in the same way Tormentors are an imprint of Nezarec. The Harbinger wields strand abilities to attack the player and pull them around, while the Omen wields stasis abilities to attack the player and freeze them. All members of the Dread feel formidable to me with the exception of the Husk. They don't feel very threatening to me because I always break their crits, removing their most potent attack from the equation. The Scions and Subjugators are very dangerous and need to be killed on sight to avoid getting slowed or thrown around by stasis and strand attacks, while the Grim are less dangerous but can screw you over if they give you tinnitus at critical moments. I found myself running stasis and strand resist mods continuously throughout Final Shape content, because I was most afraid of those enemies. The Dread add a much needed refresh to Destiny combat and are the first major new faction since the Scorn in Forsaken, as other expansions simply added new units or augmented versions of existing factions like the Shadow Legion or Lucent Hive. The Dread are the first faction that feels completely new in a while. At the beginning of the story, the Guardian receives visions from the Traveler, who grants them new power to defeat the Witness. The new subclass called Prismatic allows players to mix and match abilities, aspects, and fragments from all 5 elemental subclasses, creating incredible build crafting potential and fun gameplay. Thankfully, unlike Beyond Light and Lightfall, Prismatic is acquired in the first mission of the campaign and unlocked throughout. There are some elements that are not unlocked until post-campaign content, but just by playing the campaign, you're able to unlock a complete kit and use your new abilities in the actual main story of the expansion. This is very important because in the past you haven't been able to even start unlocking your new abilities until after you beat most of the content an expansion has to offer, which felt a bit hollow and frustrating. Prismatic introduces a new ability called Transcendence, which is essentially a new super that allows you to wield light and dark simultaneously and supercharges ability recharge rate, weapon damage, and gives unique grenades. It feels like a turbocharged version of Song of Flame, the new Warlock Solar Super. I love the interesting combinations Prismatic allows, and hope that in the future we will get access to more existing abilities and aspects, as the current selection has one of each ability from each subclass, which limits the potential a bit. I know this was done to avoid it being too overpowered, but if Destiny 3 truly is coming and we're getting into the end of Destiny 2's life cycle, I think Bungie should swing for the fences and just unlock everything for Prismatic to give players a fun experience. Even in its current limited form, Prismatic is super fun and brings a lot of new life to Destiny. While the gameplay was incredibly fun, Final Shape's launch was not without issues. Servers were very unstable during the first 24 hours, which made it difficult for many people to complete any activities during that time. I ended up getting lucky and not dealing with as many error codes and server issues as some of my friends, but I still didn't have time to complete the legendary campaign on June 4th, even though I took work off to play, because I kept getting kicked to orbit repeatedly at a few different points. I made it to the Witness boss fight in Iconoclasm, but ended up going to bed before completing it. The server issues combined with Destiny's unorthodox networking structure, requiring players to be connected to servers to access any content in the game, even when playing alone, as I did for most of the expansion's narrative and post-campaign content, was frustrating. I have no idea what it would take for players to be able to load into activities solo, but it felt weird that the Pale Heart, which isn't automatically populated with other players, still required a stable server connection to access. I was even unable to connect with other players for ostensibly match-made activities on day 1, like the new strike. It wasn't a huge issue as the strike was fairly easy to complete solo, but I was a bit exasperated by the end of the day. This soured the initial experience a bit, but I still came away with a very positive impression. Thankfully, the server problems largely abated by the second day. At that point, players came face to face with some of the buggy issues with the post-campaign content, which made things a bit more frustrating than they should have been. There are several known issues, one of which has led Bungie to disable a key piece of content required to unlock Kvostov, the exotic version of the first weapon players ever get their hands on in Destiny. It feels a bit bad to not be able to acquire the new exotic version of the first weapon the player acquires in Destiny to bookend the gameplay experience. At this point, I'm stuck waiting for a patch to be reunited with our oldest weapon, as I have every other step of the quest completed. I also ran into issues with some of the prerequisites to unlock certain prismatic fragments. My Vestiges of Light kept bugging out and either not dropping or converting to legendary vestiges. If I was a betting woman, I would guess these issues stem from the final shape's delay and troubled development. After the layoffs, it was leaked that Bungie had delayed the expansion by 3 months in order to allow the studio to make the expansion great. When layoffs, delays, and changes late in development like this occur in the games industry, it usually results in a less stable final product, which can lead to a worse first day experience as a trade-off for adding more content. This likely occurred in conjunction with Destiny 2 experiencing near record highs of player counts on the first day, resulting in the server issues. It's a bit unfortunate those issues happened, but thankfully Bungie seems like they're working to swiftly address them. I'm not going to enumerate all of the post-campaign content here because I think it would make this video too long, but everything on offer is very fun. I particularly have enjoyed the addition of a voice actor for Micah 10 and their role as a potential new speaker for the Traveler. She's a standout addition to the cast, just like the voice actors for The Witness and Zavala. The raid Salvation's Edge was possibly the most difficult contest mode experience of all time. According to Raid Report, the raid was first completed 18 hours and 59 minutes after launch, a full 10 minutes later than the previous world's first for a raid, Last Wish, which happened 5.5 years ago. If the rules for contest mode emblems had not been changed in recent years, extending contests to 48 hours from 24, only a single team would have earned the emblem, which barely beats the 2 teams that cleared Last Wish in the first 24 hours. A second team wouldn't clear the raid until 6 hours later, showing how brutally difficult this raid was on contest. Less than 700 teams cleared the raid in the first 24 hours and earned the emblem, which is the fewest ever in the history of 48-hour contest mode. My team tried our hands at this contest mode, but hit a brick wall in the first encounter. We eventually gave up after seeing only a single team cleared in the first 24 hours. It's not like we're horrible players either because we successfully earned Godslayer as our day 1 prep, but the bar to succeed on this day 1 was just so high that we couldn't do it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit disappointed we weren't able to go farther in the raid, but that's not to invalidate my teammates or anything. This contest was just brutal given the limited time to prepare and very tight and complex mechanics in every encounter. We plan to try again later in the week, but I want to experience Salvation's Edge so badly. It seems like the hardest raid Bungie has ever made. After the world first completion of Salvation's Edge, the final mission for the final shape, Excision, unlocked. In this mission, the Vanguard teams up with all of their allies to assault the Witness at the ritual site after their connection to the Traveler was severed during the raid. The mission is a match-made 12-player activity that sees every single ally the Vanguard has made make an appearance, including House Light, Keidel's Empire, and Savathun's Lucent Brood. The gameplay of the mission borders on sensory obscenity because at times so many people are present and so many things are happening happening on screen that it's hard to follow. It makes it really fun to play though. The mission has similar but substantially scaled back DPS mechanics to the raid, plus no darkness zone, unlimited revives, and no wipe mechanics. Seeing the gigantic, many-armed form of the Witness in full glory is amazing and absolutely wild. After each DPS phase, players grab the sword relic and smash more statues from the ritual site until the Witness is substantially weakened. In Final Stand, Ghost is empowered by the Traveler and shoots a beam of light into the Witness, destroying them and excising their blight from the Traveler. Afterwards, a series of cutscenes play showing the aftermath of the mission. Ghost uses all of his light in the final push to defeat the Witness and is rendered lifeless. The Guardian sees this and becomes enraged, asking the Traveler to bring back Ghost in return for saving their god. The cutscene is heart-wrenching and very well performed by the female Awoken voice actress. I'm sure the other 5 voice actors did well, but the female Awoken voice is my Guardian's true voice. Cade intervenes and sacrifices his light to resurrect Ghost and heal him, causing Cade to return to the Traveler and be reunited with Sundance. The ending is perfect. Ghost is reawakened in the finale by the Guardian, mirroring him waking up the Guardian in the opening mission of Destiny. It's perfect symmetry. It also solves the problem of Cade's death losing meaning after resurrection, because he sacrifices himself to let his favorite Guardian's ghost live. It's very poignant that in our hour of need, the Traveler was silent and didn't help us, but our close friend did. It helps drive home the theme that the thing that allowed the Coalition to defeat the Witness was our unity and allies, while the thing that allowed the Witness to be defeated was their disunity and dissent. A vanguard united stands tall, while a Witness divided falls. Our allies are the thing that gives our life meaning, not our gods or paracausal powers. We make our own fate by surrounding ourselves with people who are kind and care about us. The Witness's fatal flaw was their inability to find meaning in a meaningless universe. Their inability to find meaning in the people around them destroyed them. It's a beautiful moral and the best conclusion to the Light and Darkness saga that I could ever hope for. Ultimately, the final shape exceeded my expectations, which were already quite high. Bungie created a masterpiece from both a story and gameplay perspective. Executives and management at Bungie, I'm talking to you directly right now. What your team of developers has pulled off in the last year with Into the Light and the final shape is fantastic. They need to be properly compensated for their triumph. I don't know what the problem is at other times that prevents releases of this caliber from happening, but you need to listen to your developers and let them create as ambitious and exciting ideas as they want to. Don't hold them back or constrain them to unrealistic deadlines because you think it won't be profitable. The final shape truly shows us that Bungie is a fantastic studio, capable of great things if you give them the extra time needed to create the game that they want. Chase creating great games instead of greater profits. If you make the best game possible, you will never run out of goodwill from your audience and community, and that's more valuable than reporting bigger numbers to shareholders. Most people are happy to wait a little longer if it means the final product will be better. I'd rather have a delayed and polished game than a rushed one. To the developers, I'm not trying to be an armchair game developer here because I know making a game this good is very difficult, and a lot of the time you don't get the praise and recognition you deserve for how hard you work. If you worked on the final shape, just know that I'm immensely grateful for your contribution and think you created something amazing even if you were laid off before the end of the project. I'm so sorry you had to deal with so many issues during development, and I'm very grateful you still tried your best despite the problems behind the scenes. Take some much needed rest and time off after launch if you can, and when you're ready, I'm excited to see what you will create next. I hope you can see how meaningful the final shape was to me. I think it's your masterpiece. You're capable of creating great art.